to madness when you consider that Sargon hates SJWs. Now, to be clear, I'm going to refer to white privilege, right? Sargon hates the concept of white privilege and anti-white discrimination. And all that's very nice, but the root of this white privilege thing is the assumption of equality. Because there are these gaps. Why are there these gaps? Gaps in wealth, gaps in health, gaps in life expectancy, gaps in going to prison. And groups care about these gaps. The groups care about the group gaps. Why are blacks earning less? Why are Hispanics going to prison more often? That's what Hispanics care about, not necessarily what their individual opportunities are. They're not thinking about individuals, they're thinking about their group. They care about their group and they care about the group collective inequality. If you assume genetic equality between all identifiable groups, well, then any gap between the groups is ipso facto believed to be a product of discrimination or some sort of circumstance. This is the root assumption of everything they say. All that stuff you say you hate Sargon, all that anti-white discrimination, the root assumption of all of this is genetic equality between these groups. If you want to say there's no white privilege, then why are there these gaps? I have an answer, Sargon. It's a genetic difference. But what is your answer? Skepticism. In the case of Kraut, we saw someone who hated the tree, but loved the root from which the tree sprang. He created his channel by attacking the tree, and then destroyed his channel by defending the root. That root. Equality of intelligence, equality of temperament, even equality of predisposition to political views. And given what the twin studies show about the heritability of political views in the United States, there's absolutely no reason to just assume, as if it was some given, that all the races are the same in their political predispositions. Which brings us to the last problem, that's the burden of proof. Now, we have nothing to prove. A great irony is that both the skeptics and the SJWs in practice agree to an underlying genetic equality between all identifiable groups. Call them races, call them whatever. Now, when pressed, you'll get a skeptic who will usually say they don't know. They don't know about group differences in cognitive traits. They could all be a result of circumstance, they could all be a result of genetics, and that would be fine. But in practice, all of their policy proposals are based on an implicit cognitive equality, or a close enoughness in all cognitive traits that genetic differences aren't going to matter. But what if all this individualism stuff they go on about is just a white people thing? What if there's no way you're ever going to convince brown people to be individualists? What if it's all down to a genetic difference? That your country is destined to turn into Algeria, or at best something like Mexico or Brazil, or at worst something like South Africa. Wow, just wow. I can't believe he said that, especially given all of the research on this topic that shows no race differences, and oh wait, there's almost no research on any of this. And what little research there is evidence in my direction. There's no reason to assume equality, and given what we know about evolution, and given what we know about every other mental trait, there's no reason to assume there isn't going to be some difference. And the fact that a successful and prosperous multiracial state is just the assumed outcome, well, call that what you want, but it's certainly not skeptical. There's a much better way to describe it. The set of beliefs you happen to have in your place and time in history. Anything outside of that, you are to be skeptical of. And that's what the skepticism is of.
All right. Hello, comrades. I'm back. I was the recipient of a false flagging campaign on my YouTube channel, ostensibly by the alt-right. It had to lead back to them because they flagged this channel. They flagged David Sherratt, Alternative Facts, who used to be known as Spino, who's a staunch opponent of the alt-right and makes a lot of videos debunking and exposing the alt-right. And they hit specifically ContraPoint's anti-alt-right videos on the same day too. And so they got me banned from Twitter for 7 days because I got a little salty with Tara McCarthy. I didn't even use foul language with her. I just I said something to the effect of, because she was mixed race, when, you know, her friends in the alt-right get political power, that they're going to put her in the oven with all the other mixed race people, that she's not proper white. So Twitter, I guess, saw put in the oven and was like, mistook me for the people that were actually reporting me. While I was gone, apparently a massive civil war broke out in the alt-right and skeptic segments of the anti-SJW community. The skeptics and the alt-right have always had a love-hate relationship in terms of they are united by the banner of being anti-social justice, anti-feminist, so on and so forth. They're under one flag of anti-progressivism. But this, I've said on the channel for a long time that the house of anti-SJW politics will not stand. The alt-right is too attached to the Jewish question. The alt-right is too attached to eugenics. The alt-right is too attached to the bell curve. The alt-right is too attached to their pseudoscience. And the skeptics are too attached to evidence. You know, for in terms of those specific issues, not in terms of feminism, because contrary to popular belief, it's not possible to debunk feminism. I remember that thought occurring when Armored Skeptic shifted from creationist to feminism. The first thing that popped into my head was, wait a minute, you can't debunk feminism. You can challenge statistics, but you can't debunk feminism. The very idea is ludicrous. And as much as they refused to engage in debate and they would dismiss feminists, this is how much the skeptics have engaged in pointless, masturbatory debate with the alt-right, when what they should be doing, and their moral ethos, right, like, is their fealty is to the facts. Supposedly, right, that's their banner. They're not supposed to be debating the alt-right. They're supposed to be debunking them. And if you want to, like, see, like, a history of it, you never saw a TJ Thunderfoot or you know, any of the old school banner skeptics engaging with creationists in a sense that somehow there was any threshold of proof, there was never any sort of agnosticism. They were militantly anti-theist. That no matter what the creationist said, there was no question that empiricism pointed towards the Christian deity not existing. And that's the same case here. You know, I put a clip by Alternative Hypothesis, who was one of the people caught up in this shit show where Kraut had a Discord server where he was collecting research to confront and make a case against the alt-right, which, I'm glad that Kraut came around again to pushing against the alt-right. I don't think that you have to make a scientific case against the alt-right. I don't think you need to cite a bunch of studies and bullshit, because they have an infrastructure of quacks like J.F. Garepi who will muddy the water. And I used to think J.F. Garepi was okay when I didn't know the race realism stuff. He was good on the science of why creationism didn't work. He was a regular guest on The Drunken Peasants, when I used to watch that show before the big break in the skeptic community against Atheism Plus. I'm going to be jumping around a lot of this video because I was gone and there's a lot of stuff pent up. So J.F. Garepi is another... He's currently the banner biologist of the alt-right, because he says that he uses the language of empiricism, he uses the language of biology to endorse an alt-right talking point. The alt-right talking point, race is real, is about as bad faith as it's okay to be white. Anybody outside of these circles who doesn't take what the alt-right says at surface value recognizes that it's okay to be white is a benign veil to cover up a sort of a malignant, cancerous idea about it. You know, the implication is that it's okay for white people to be proud of being white. And there's quite a few reasons why that doesn't work. But on the same token, when someone like Richard Spencer says race is real, it sounds benign enough that to the average person you ask them, oh, is race real? They'll go, yeah, because they are thinking of basic heritability. They're thinking about race in the most basic biological sense, meaning that, you know, certain genetic characteristics. It's just like when people complain about, it's just like when people try to measure gender identity on secondary sex characteristics. Gender, sex are about as arbitrarily demarcated by human science as race. Which is, if you ask any serious scientist about whether or not there are different races or subspecies of humans, a serious scientist, not someone who's been cucked by the alt-right like J.F. Garepi into having his intellectual vanity stroked if he just pimps out his understanding of scientific language for their movement. No serious scientist is going to tell you that there's any such thing as a black race or a Asian race, a white race, because these heritable traits of ethnicity and race, as we define them, are not distinguishing factors. They don't correlate to anything. They don't correlate to IQ. They don't correlate to political disposition. That's not how heritability works. You know, heritability has to do with eye color, skin color, hair texture, nose shape. You know, on and on, chromosomal predispositions to diabetes and breast cancer and stuff like that. You don't inherit a taste for welfare from your ancestors. You don't. What's more of this stupid bullshit that the alt-right says is you know, the alt-right uses this very sort of Calvinist rhetoric. You know, Calvinism was a form of like extreme Christianity that believed everybody was good or bad. It was predetermined who was going to heaven and who was going to hell, and these people, you know, this puritanical belief. The alt-right holds this puritanical belief that people are born with moral failings that are correlated to genes. You know, Kraut was pushing back against this. And collaborating with brilliant scientists to push back against something that is basic biology 101 that you don't inherit a gene to vote Democrat. You don't inherit a gene that makes you lazy and makes you do drugs, or you know, if you listen to these alt-righters, they talk about crime being genetically inherited, a propensity for crime. This kind of arbitrary scientific racism was debunked 100 years ago. All that phrenology and the sinister slope of the scalp, and you know, this stuff that the alt-right talks about some groups are born with a predisposition for culture. You know what I'm saying? Like white babies are born and they're like, oh, give me Mozart! It's my culture! Give me Mozart! It's a crock of shit, man. You want to see genetic evidence that the white race is neither inferior nor superior to any other genetically, you know, in the most arbitrary sense, distinct part of the human family tree? Go to how do I even say this properly? I'm fascinated by the fact that the alt-right pretends that white trash doesn't exist. The alt-right acts like Florida doesn't exist. Like the internet doesn't have a bunch of world star videos of like poor white trash high on meth beating up people at the drive-thru at McDonald's. And you know, like there's no such thing as Asians are genetically good at math. That's a crock of shit. All of these things, you know, because the alt-right also plays with putting people on pedestals in terms of genetics. So, you know, in order to not seem bigoted, you know, they talk about how genetically Jews are born brilliant, that they're born with incredibly high IQs. What a crock of shit. Most public schools don't have kids take IQ tests anymore because the scientific consensus, and we're talking about like a huge consensus, like the consensus about climate change, is that intelligence is more complex than IQ, that intelligence is deeper than IQ. And let's say I don't subscribe to the idea of lower life forms. You know, the science on human subspeciation, the idea of lower races has been debunked far and wide. Far and wide. We've already cracked the human genome. We've read all of the data that we need to read to find out if there's any kind of genetic difference between humans and any forms of subspeciations out the window. I can't believe that in 2017 going into 2018, this is a current year argument, just for the people who respond to the video, we're still having a fucking argument. Basically, we're human beings on the internet, in you know, at the height of human civilization, arguably in terms of technology, and we're still having arguments that were debunked when the fucking Wright brothers hadn't run a plane into the fucking sky. If you see the motifs of the alt-right, people are dressed up like Vikings and shit. Red Ice TV's new cat